Okay, let's go ahead and get started with this advanced textures video here. This is a piece of canvas, and I've laid out a piece of contact paper and transferred a brick pattern on here. And I've intricately cut out the bricks, and I would actually call this contact masking. It's more of a illustrating preference when you're doing the artwork. But if you want to, you can actually get a piece of Pellin. You can see this is where I transferred this design on here. I've lined this up and transfer the pattern out with the Sharpie and cut it out. But if you don't want to have to do all this cutting, and again, this is a faux painting concept, you can take this and maybe spray glue it or tape it to the wall and blast these bricks out and get in and out quicker. Again, it's just a preference. The look's pretty much going to be the same as long as this is flush against the wall. Now, Pellin you can get at your local fabric store or what have you. It's about 2 feet wide times infinity, however long you want it. And I've cut this out with the stencil burner. This stuff's pretty durable. It's hard to stretch apart, it's very fibrous, and it lasts a long time. The t-shirt artists use this to do t-shirt stencils and so on. So it holds up well to spray glue, and again lasts a long time. So what we're going to do first of all here, again this is an advanced textures video, just trying to add more tricks to the bag, is we're going to sneak in all these little colors, which are predominantly going to be opaque colors, and then we're going to come in and do subtractive highlighting, a lot of weird shading, and try to achieve a sense of realism from that point. Okay, what I have here first is this folk art brick type of color here. You can see a brick is a brick is a brick. And the opaque color family is where we're going to be working in today. So the first step here, I want to come in and just randomly shade these bricks. I'm going to come in here with basically this color and then raw sienna. I'm going to save some white spaces here for the raw sienna. Airbrush paints, unless you order them online, tend to be really primary and very bold a lot of the times. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind here is that these types of textural tricks, I try to get people's wheels turning with these. You could do this maybe at a skating rink. People could actually literally take a spray can and write graffiti over this, and it will look very realistic. This could be a science fiction background or backdrop of some kind, breaking through a wall or something. Or it could just be around, I don't know, a fireplace or a wall, or definitely a restaurant. Another point I mentioned here is the actual colors of bricks themselves. This is this color palette, what we're doing now. Bricks can be very stonewashed. They can be a lot of different colors, so don't think this is the universal way to do a brick. You're going to change up the colors and it gets kind of artsy. And one thing to mention here is you can actually throw a lot of different brick type of colors in here. But again, try to stay away from real primary tones. This is kind of like a, I don't know, just a muted color theory here. You can call it what you want. But it's really up to you as far as the whole brick color palette. If you spray a real loud, transparent color right out of the bottle, you're going to have a mess on your hands. And it's going to look very cartoony. Color's everything. So try to check out these little Anitas and folk art types of paints. Again, they do have to be strained with cold water and feature floor wax, and they're going to flow pretty good. I would not use these for exterior types of concepts, like on the walls outside of somewhere, because the sun will beat these things up. But for canvas work, illustration, and so on, you'll be fine. So I have my white sponge here and try to grab the interesting side of the sponge. And make sure that you don't get too heavy-handed in this and slop this up. We actually have to try to have some continuity and maybe tapering this out like so. I'm being kind of anal retentive here, but I think it's important because a lot of people just get in here and really jack this up and smear paint everywhere, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to be the brick here. This is really clean, thick white. You don't want to use a real thin white because it may sink on you. And when I say sink, a lot of people get confused. It may disappear. You want this to be the contrasting component to this brick. We will have to tint it down to subdue it with maybe the raw sienna or the red oxide. But again, make sure that you try to taper this out like so. See how I did a really soft fade? And then we're going to come up with a toothbrush and stipple wherever we need to. Let's get some more paint on here. I mean, don't overthink it, but just try not to do rubber stamp type of dots on here. and we'll just jump around here. Make sure you work from a photo reference. That's probably going to help quite a bit. You can get kind of blotchy like that on the corners, but just don't get too redundantly dotty and put dots everywhere. So hopefully that makes sense. Another thing we can do is come in here with a toothbrush and some opaque white, and I can actually kind of transition this sponge stuff into more of a finite type of pattern. This actually, believe it or not, as detailed as it is, it really manipulates the eye. The thing that you got to be careful with is if you get too nutty with this toothbrush, you're going to frost out the chroma or the hue of the color here, and it's just going to be a mess. So really be kind of hit and miss, but if there's any really blotchy areas that look silly, you can just come in here and do a couple of these on each brick. And again, it just kind of transitions the pattern over. Some people would not pay attention to stuff like this, but I've been doing this a long time, and I know that it's really easy for the eye to stop and to figure out that you're using sponges and so on. So sneak a little toothbrush in there if you want to, but don't get too carried away. Okay, next let's go ahead and take our mask off here, our contact paper. You can see we have a basic pattern to work with here, and what we're going to do now is come in with some shadows and start manipulating the dimension and the mortar that's in between these bricks. Okay, we're going to come in here with our opaque black, and I have my little fallout piece from the original Pellin stencil here. And take your time when you're doing this. You might want to practice a couple off to the side, but get pretty close here. And we're just going to nail down a little cast shadow on the bottom sides of these bricks here. Make sure you pay attention to your stopping and starting points of these bricks so that you don't surpass the actual shape. So that nails down a shadow. You can go in here and fill in any little parts that you miss. Just kind of freehand those. And this would actually represent the cast shadow. The sun's up here, and the shadow actually extends from the point of origin here. So take your time when you do this. I cannot emphasize enough that if you get way too black, it's going to cheese it out, and you will basically negate this crisp edge here against this soft shadow. Okay, next we're going to come in and fill in these mortar joints here, but don't put cheesy stripes, just do some dusting and pretty much just trace out this area here. And if you want to, go ahead and put some tone, some light tone on the top of these bricks here. There's going to be a reason for this, which is basically we're going to come in with some opaque white, and we're going to hold that same square up here. We're going to flash out a highlight on the top of the brick to set off like this blue kind of titanium, really cool frosty look, which really accents this mortar nicely. So I'll come in here and just lightly dust through this. No stripes. And again, let's do this down on this brick here. Come in and dust some paint on the top of this because it's going to set off our white. Also notice I'm spraying one way. I'm not waving the airbrush back and forth. What this is doing basically is giving the mortar a curvy type of feel to it. Like when the bricks are kind of crammed in there. And it's really just creating the dimension. Okay, next we're going to come in with some opaque black, and you really want to be careful here when you're doing this. Number one, take away the neurosis of getting in here and thinking you're going to trash out your edges. When you're doing this, it actually blends in pretty nicely because everything's so organic and random, the eye really doesn't pick it up that much. But again, don't get too sloppy. You'd be surprised at what you can actually control with a toothbrush when the pattern is this busy. So basically this actually kind of pulls the eye in a little bit, and we will do opaque black and opaque white, and it will actually look pretty believable. After that, we're going to take this pattern here and we're going to tint over it a little bit at about 12 inches back, maybe with some raw sienna, and just kind of subdue it a little bit so it doesn't look so bright white there. And you can see zooming in that looks pretty believable. So I will continue with the black stipple here. Then we'll come in with the white stipple. And we'll come in here with some opaque white and just contrast those black speckles. Again, don't get too nutty. You don't want to powder out this edge here. The next step after this is to come in here with the straight edge, and we're going to do my favorite part, which is the frosty top edge, which contrasts the shadow. And this edge that we do, this white edge, actually kind of slopes this mortar back. It's a real cool effect, but you also get this kind of blue, frosty titanium hue that makes the mortar look more believable. And with the raw sienna color there, we're going to come back in and basically tint this white sponging down just a smidge. Don't kill it, that's probably good enough. And you can kind of jump around. You can leave some areas white if you want to. You don't have to kill it with this color, but I think it just looks more organic and natural when we do this. Okay, my favorite part here will come in with the opaque white. You can see how this actually kind of slopes this mortar back a little bit, gives it more dimension. But I'm not sure if the camera's picking this up or not, but you also get this kind of cool blue titanium hue that happens. And that makes the mortar look more dimensional, sinking in, kind of curving around. The more you take your time doing this, I think the better off it's going to look. Patience in itself is a skill. Cannot emphasize that enough. You can see how that gives you a nice contrasting shadow to light concept that really makes this work not only from a distance but close up as well. And we'll come down here. You can actually flare certain areas up. The amount of detail is really up to you. I could really get involved with this and make it very realistic, but hopefully you see the point here. I want to also mention how close I'm getting here. This needle's almost touching the surface. Again, this is what I would call piercing or accenting, so you're really coming in here and fine-tuning things. And this sets a good standard with the whole concept of illustrating. This is what people want to do, or at least the people that call me. They don't want to do fuzzy, quick, rush-looking stuff. They want to do professional, detailed types of imagery. And we'll continue over here. Again, if you need a transparent shield to see where your stopping and starting points are, that's fine. That's actually probably going to be a good thing. I'm just using these little edges here on the whim. I didn't want to throw them out. Also notice here I'm not using a completely straight edge. That would actually cheese this out. I like the bumpiness of this pattern. As you can see here, I'm continuing to switch this around. But it gives me a more, I don't know, chipped, distressed type of look if I want to switch it around and so on. You can see how that looks a little bit more bumpy and more believable. So you can keep grabbing different things. I got some dark brown on my paintbrush here. You can come in here if you want to. Don't get too cheesy. But you can come in here and put little distress nicks and dings in the brick. And come in here with an X-Acto knife and we can scratch the bottom sides of these. And again, just throwing little things in here that will add distress. Okay, so you can see how this comes together pretty nicely now. Again, for the most part, this is totally easy. It's really about knowing your colors more than anything. I mean, anybody can basically trace or project a brick pattern, color it in, and render edges. So this is actually very sequential in nature. It doesn't take a lot of artistry at all. So the main thing is try to have fun with it and see where you can take it. Let's go ahead and move on to the next texture here. As you can see, this is a furrowed flag. And it's pretty cookie cutter as far as how to do it. But what's really cool is that there's actually a lot of intense things that you need to know about the composition. Color theory is very relevant in all this. You know, what to put on bottom, what to put on top. How intense you need to go on your shadows, in which if you go to a lot of car shows or even on motorcycle art, you'll see a lot of really overdone black, dark, obnoxious shadows. So make sure that you really pay attention to the whole color mode when we're doing this. Shadows are more sneaky and subdued to be more effective. It's easy to come in and really kill them. And also knowing the language of edges, folds, and so on will actually help you. Flags and garments and satin and all that kind of stuff, fabric, is actually pretty manipulative based upon its own elements of contour and shadow. So that's why a lot of people use them and a lot of people want them, is because they look so realistic so quickly. Let's go ahead and go on to the first step here, in which we're basically going to block out this blue area, leaving the stars covered. We're going to put a blue pearl down, and then we're going to come in and shade with transparent dark blue. We'll come in here now with this pearl blue. This is just pretty much everyday Createx pearl blue. And what this is going to do at the foundation is give us a satiny type of a quality that a flag has. Got the contact paper on here. Everything's been pretty much pre-cut. If you have a computer plotter, certainly you have an advantage with plotting all the individual stars and stripes and so on. But again, you can project, pictures and do a lot of cutting if you want to. Okay, we're coming with some transparent blue now. This is transparent deep blue. And we're just going to roll off this first edge here. It's a more acute edge. It's crisp. And we have another edge down here, which I'm going to sneak in the X-ray film here. This is going to be another acute edge. And basically it's going to start off acute and it's going to taper out like so. I'm going to flip this around. We have another acute edge here. Now I want to make sure that I stay linear with this. This starts off crisp and it fades out like so. And we're going to do some freehanding over here. Again, the white stars are covered up here. And good composition, again, is a process or a combination of acute edges and soft freehand types of strokes. This transparent deep blue gets really, really, really dark. So it's going to come in handy. We don't need any black, that's for sure. And another thing of interest here is that we don't need any cheesy white to come in and accent this flag. That may look pretty silly depending on the photo reference, but because it's transparent, we're going to roll off the edge here. And again, I'm not crylining back and forth. I'm not doing any of that. And I'm going to leave the lighter areas alone, and that will actually become the whitish or the lighter part of the garment and the fold. A lot of freehanding here. And it's really not a good thing to break out too many shields and go to town and have all these real cheesy, crisp edges. This is all pretty dark down in here. I'm just going to blast this out. Nothing fancy. Now when something like this is clear coated, if it's on a gas tank or whatever, the pearl paint will actually look really, really cool. Like I said earlier, it will refract and reflect light, or basically refract light, and it will really give a satiny type of feel. A lot of freehanding down in here. A lot of times it's a good idea to keep your finger maybe on a certain star or something to comparatively see where you're at, so you can assign these dark intensities via that area. I will oversaturate this area here just to show you how dark this dark blue gets. It really gets dark, which is going to be cool. Come down here or up here. And again, bring in some freehand strokes like I'm doing right here, so we can assign the appropriate depth and tapering of some of these edges. Now, I have an acute edge here that's really solid. Again, we need to roll that around. I'm going to lightly dust this. I'm basically dusting against this edge. You can even spray this way, little wispy strokes, which create the roll around. And that's why I picked this image, because it's a really good teaching exercise for just folds in general. And we'll take the red stripes off now. And we'll come in with some deep red now. It's going to look pink at the beginning, but it gets a lot darker. Make sure you take your time. If you have little bleed areas, you can come in sometimes and just scratch those bleed areas off with an X-Acto knife, or just get a white paintbrush or a freehand shield, and that stuff's going to go away. Remember, that's how pen striping was created, through little boo-boos and bleed spots. It's kind of funny how this all comes together pretty quickly. Believe it or not, it looks like you did a lot more than you actually did, but this whole process is, again, manipulated just by its edges and its whole composition, folds, and so on. So I'll continue exposing these stars here. Let's talk about some shadows here. Again, I want to emphasize that black is way too much. You'll kill this with some real strong, powdery, grainy, opaque black. So if you have to use black, make sure you hyperextend it. We're talking about 10% black, maybe 60% future floor wax, or you can also use a transparent gray. It's really up to you. So first of all, let's come in and let's establish our edges here. And we have one acute edge right here. And again, acute means crisp, and I'm going to really apply the less is more principle here. I've had a lot of students do this exercise, and the ones that usually chill out and don't overdo it pull this off pretty nicely. So now you see that's an acute edge, it's crisp and so on. We need to transition that with some freehanding right over here. And I've always said this on flames, drop shadows on flames or whatever. Shadows are more effective when they're sneaky, when they're subdued and they're not real obvious. So you always pick and choose your battles with how dark you want to go, but you're going to be quite pleased if you work really, really light. Step back from it, go look at a different pattern, maybe your wallpaper or something, and then reassociate, reset your mind, look back at it, and you may not need as much. The mind is addictive. Airbrushing is an addictive art form, so you got a very powerful tool in your hand here to go in and kill things. So I think it's actually a skill to learn to back off and walk away from things. So let's come in here. I have another edge that is right here. It's acute, so make sure I stay linear here. Go real soft. Just kind of sketch that out, see where I'm at. Looks good. And I'm going to come over here, and this is where I started. I'm going to move this over a bit and really take your time here. I'm just going to go straight up, get real close, and let's crop this all the way down. But back off, okay? Don't overdo it. Step back, take a look. And there's also some shading on what I call the roll around. This is rolling around as fabric does. So if you have to go to two hands, you can. You got to keep this straight. And let's go to this area here. Split that all the way down. Let's go over to this area here. And again, I have my over-reduced black, or you could use gray. Now there's going to be some freehanding down here. Don't krylon back and forth. Again, work very invisible. You can always come back later. And to be honest with you, that's pretty much almost a stopping point right there. It's going to get really, really too dark too soon. I can shade that over a little bit. And this is a pretty hard edge over here. I'm going to come in and nail this down. Okay, I have all my basic acute edges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are all really crisp edges. Looking at the original photo reference here, that's pretty much all there is. Everything else is going to be free-handed. So I'm going to come in now and lightly shade the nuance, subliminal type of areas here. You can really kill it at this stage if you get in here. I've already talked about black, but coming in here and putting things really too creasy. Now, I'm shading the white of the flag with this over-reduced black, again, or gray. But the shading over here on the stars is going to be with that deep blue. I'm going to continue to shade and transition the stars around. So I will not come in here with cheesy black and offset the continuity of the colors here. So I'll do that later. Right now, let's get in here and nail down some of these tones. I'm also going to sneak in a bird shield just to kind of knuckle some edges. Let me open my roller there. I'm going to put my knuckles underneath this, actually my whole hand, and just create a subdued crease. Not too dominant. That's probably good enough right there. And that should be a good crease, a really, really soft crease in this flag. Crease, and I'm going to fade that over. Let's put another one right here. Where I have almost a reverse L. Okay, let's do some freehanding. And collectively, this presupposes an indentation in the flag. No big deal. You don't have to overthink it, but you will get used to the language of these shields. Now over here, we have a really acute edge. Again, I need to come in here and put a little wash next to that. It's common sense, everybody gets that. That transitions that around a little bit. And down here, there's some freehanding. Let's knuckle this. Make sure I'm on point. A little crease there, and there's one here too. Slow down when you're doing these also. I'm looking at the photo reference probably about, I don't know, every 30 seconds or so. And I think in this area I'm even going to go lighter than I did on my original demo with this, because again, some of the students come in, they work really, really light, and it just looks better, to be honest with you, so I'll stop at that point. This is all going to be pretty much filled in over here. So you can see how the wavy thing's kind of taken on its own life. Okay, down here, we got the hard edge. Let's put a soft wash against that. Same thing here, we got a hard edge. Let's put a soft wash against that. A good part of all this too is to actually stay off the white areas and know where those white areas are. Once you violate a white area, you're really going to toast this. So you don't really need to keep coming in here with the template and really getting obnoxious with these edges. That first pass is probably more than enough. But again, once the edge is already established, you can come back in here, put a wash up against it, and you can still have your roll around. Okay, let's go in here and do some blue. We've got ourselves a nice groovy, wavy American flag here. This is the dark blue. And one thing that we don't want to do is leave these stars looking like cheesy sticker stars. So, of course, where the dark areas are, you have to shade the stars. Don't shade too far over because it won't look believable. Keep the linear nature of the shadow crawling over where it needs to go, and of course you will go dark to light. You can see how easy this is, how easy it comes together once you understand the colors more than anything. Some of these stars are foreshortened, they're subdued, there's crinkles in the fabric, or whatever that may be causing things to happen. But once you come in here, again with this transparent dark blue, this really adds to the drama. And pretty much what we're doing is just shading the sides of all these. That's a good example right here on this star, how when you shade it, it really creates an indentation to that area of the garment. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up. You can see how this definitely starts to come together pretty quickly. From a distance, this would almost look photographic. Again, this is very manipulative just in its textural properties of how fabrics or garments actually roll. You have acute edges, you have very subdued, sneaky edges. Again, I use the bird shield. And just the whole composition is manipulative. Hopefully we learned some good color theory here, you know, what to put what on what. And shadows aren't always gray or black, they're actually the absence of light, in which this case is actually dark blue. So let's go ahead and go on to the next texture at this time. So as I'm dusting this out here, let me talk a little bit about what you can actually do with this. In this case, when you think about chrome spheres, They can definitely be a fine art, surrealism, or fantasy art type of a concept here. Sometimes just the little nuances of the darks and lights really bring a lot of drama to your paintings. There's a lot of different ways to do chrome, but I think the main thing that you need to think about is the fact that you just got to paint what you see, have really good photo reference materials, and you can sneak paint brushes in, electric erasers, you know, templates or whatever you want to sneak in really. So just don't overthink it. Practice. It's really up to you what you want to do with this, as long as you know the basic fundamentals of all the different variations of gray and black and so on. Okay, so I'm just going to come through here with a breaking point, and you'll see that whether it be chrome letters or chrome geometric shapes, you're going to have this kind of either crisp or fuzzy middle point, which is the horizon line on letters, of course. And then you're going to have like sky tones, again the middle point, and then earth tones. Now this presupposes that chrome reflects and refracts everything around it. This chrome I want to keep simple for teaching purposes, presupposing this is just in a square white room. You can go to craft stores, you can actually buy chrome spheres like this and set an apple against it and take a photograph of it, and you'll actually have a pretty good reference for all the little nuances and so on. So again, on this shape I'm going to keep it simple. You're going to have a lot of different variations of gray and black. Sometimes you'll have blue or purple hues at the top or bottom or whatever, but chrome is chrome. It just depends on if it's a doorknob, a sphere, a letter, or whatever. So in the beginning here I'm just going to sketch, just kind of set everything up, go into two hands to keep my airbrush balanced. I'm going to get closer now, because this is a piercy area back here. Notice also I'm not waving the airbrush around back and forth. I've said every single video that creates problems for me where I have patchiness, and you got to taper and blend things out. You have to lay things evenly. The very first airbrush class I ever took when I was 21, this is probably the main thing I learned, and the best thing, which is you're sketching things first. Now chrome, as simple as it is in its elements, it's actually one of the catchier things that you could actually put into your piece, whether it be fantasy art, fine art, animation, or whatever. Because it's so dramatic and high contrast, its appeal is pretty much a standalone type of thing. It's really an eye catcher. That's why I'm throwing it in here. You're going to have many different variations of black and gray when you're doing chrome. You can either take your black and over-reduce it with future floor wax, or you can just pre-mix a bunch of grays and black if you want to. It's really up to you. So let me try to teach this. We're going to come in here with a big fat stripe, a big fuzzy stripe in the middle here. You're going to have some kind of random pattern down here. And when you get to this point, sometimes it's a good idea to really look at your photo reference, depending on what you're trying to do, and stay true to all these little nuances. Now I have the detail nozzle here. I'm going to roll it to the left and really be careful in this area down here. There's a really crisp edge over here on the side. Now again, black is, I think, real important to manipulate chrome. If you look at heavy metal magazine, the letters heavy metal, a lot of times have a black backing behind them, just because it sets off the drama of the chrome. You can also, as the great artist Soriyami does, sneak in paint brushes, electric erasers, colored pencils, and so on. I'm going to make sure I maintain my symmetry here. Make sure it's not off. Okay, I got my opaque gray there. You can see that. I'm going to skip a little white area here. Just kind of bring this in and curve it around. The eye, when you're talking about chrome here, the eye actually likes a lot of different variations of gray when you're doing chrome. it's easy to get lazy and just to do one tone. This is a random type of sketching here, but I'm still trying to nail down these shapes as much as I can. Always staying in a swooping type of motion too. I don't want to get too straight. You got to be the sphere. Now one thing we will do is come back in with some white here, and that's actually one of the cooler parts of all this. The white actually, again, sets off the titanium shift. And you get this blue kind of frosty thing going on. And I can put some gray down here a little bit. Put some gray down here. Sometimes things need to taper, so if you're coming in here with these little isolated random strokes, taper them out. The tapering is what a lot of people have a hard time with. Smooth this out a little bit. So right now, even with what we've done so far, just this simple thing here, it's given us a lot of good blending and variations. But let's come in with the white now, really take our time and kind of smooth some of this out and do some accenting. Okay, I'll come in here now with the white, and I cannot emphasize enough how you need to take the Future Floor Wax and add it to your white if it's real grainy, which I may have to. Createx Black and White has always been that way. I know that they're trying to improve their formulas, but it's something that you're just going to have to do. Even my operating pressure is about 55 psi. This paint's still really grainy, so add the Future Floor Wax if you need to. And we'll come in here now and put the white on top of this gray. And this is probably the most detailed part here, so I want to be careful. Make sure I nail all this down. The best skill you'll ever have using an airbrush is patience, that's for sure. I always tell my students I think we've all been brought to tears. Anybody that's been doing this over 10 years, or maybe you were in tears your first year, but definitely takes a lot of practice, a lot of hand-eye coordination, and a lot of patience. Now again, I will come in here with some transparent blue and lightly dust over some of this. That's what's cool about chrome, is you can actually just keep going back and forth and frosting and re-blacking things, and eventually it will take on life of its own and look pretty neat. So nothing real fancy, just paint what you see. Try to get the best photo references you can of the chrome sphere. And you'll start to see the redundancy and how it all goes down. Go ahead and take our mask off here. Okay, that's a little dominant down there, so let's calm that down a little bit. And let's bring a little bit of this transparent deep blue in here. I'm really just going to try to transition this dark tone down here. The top's fine with me. Kind of lightly, very lightly dust in the darker to lighter areas here. Just come down here and hit it, but don't kill it. Okay, so that's pretty much the chrome sphere concept here. I guess the main thing I want people to get out of it is the basic darkness that's coming through the middle that has a tapering type of, I don't know, negating type of spiral to it. And then you come in with this white, and you got your real cool titanium frosty stuff coming on. And again, grays, a lot of different levels of grays and so on you can put in this. But just definitely play around with different types of chrome spheres, and you can pull off a pretty cool look pretty quickly. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the chrome letters here. I have the background blacked out here. Got the clear contact paper down on here. We're going to basically take a piece of tape and stream it across the middle part of these letters here to establish the horizon point. So what we're going to do basically is take a Sharpie and basically draw a straight line across the front part of these letters here, and then we're going to basically curve them up and intricately cut these out. And I'll just take my Sharpie and draw a straight line on the front part of the letters here. Now this is going to be different than the chrome sphere. The chrome sphere had a very subdued type fuzzy horizontal break. Signage concepts and letters usually are a little bit different. That's really just how they've been done over the years, where this is more crisp. And I'm going to basically come in and taper these edges up here from the original straight edge that I just created. And this will actually be cut from here down. So I'm putting little swoopy types of marks here. Now if you have a part of the letter here where it's hard to do a quick little curve like that, just kind of slowly bring it over and just basically elongate it. We'll go ahead and cut the bottom sides of these out. Make sure you really take your time. Okay, now that these are all cut out here, I'm going to come across with my opaque black. Just go straight across the horizon, or midpoint here. And we're going to come in now, we're just going to fade our gray down a little bit. Basically on the edges of the letters, you can taper out, and kind of crawl up against the edges, but leave the bottoms of the letters alone. And we'll fade the C down a little bit. Let's go on to the next step here, in which we're basically going to expose the tops of these letters here. And we'll go ahead and cut out the top part of the C here. Make sure you take your time. So now here's what we have. This was actually a transparent deep blue. I'll put about 2 or 3 drops of opaque white, and if the camera's picking this up, it's a lot more powdery and faint. That's what we want. And what you can do is basically go darker to lighter on this if you want to. Try to leave a white type of area here. Now if it's too annoying and I need to come back with more white, I definitely can. Some people put clouds through the blue. It's really up to you. But I can always powder it back down. I'll make decisions like that as I go. So blue on the top here. And we'll go across all these now. Again, make sure that when you're cutting these out, you don't actually spray into the dimension. That's going to be a totally isolated area. So dark to light. Save a void white area across here. If you need to sneak a template in to protect your little curvy area so that you don't dust it out, that's probably a good idea. So I'll continue spraying all these. And we'll go on to the next step now. We're actually going to remove all the masking, and this is very arduous, trust me, but it's graphic arts, it's very involved, a lot of cutting. If you have computer plotters, more power to you. But we're going to take all the masking off, we're going to cover up the front part of the letters, and we're going to shade the dimension. And we'll go ahead and take the mask off. You can see the dimension has not been touched. I think the dimension's a real big part of this. And on the next step here, I actually have the front of the letters covered with the contact paper here. And I'm starting to cut out the dimension. So again, take your time when you do this, cut evenly, and make sure that after you cut this, you smash the contact paper down so you don't have bleed spots. Okay, let's come in here with some opaque gray here, nothing fancy. It's the same gray that we faded down with, and I'm basically just going to come in here and go solid on all the dimension. And again, watch your overspray when you're doing this. Okay, I've darkened that gray a little bit more to where it's more of a charcoal type gray now, or a smoky gray. Still opaque. And this is a real important part here. I'm going to stay true to where all the dark areas are here. I pulled this image up through the Zara 3D program. I really recommend it. It's one of the best 3D letter programs out there. You can drag the fonts back and forth. So I'm just going to stay true to where my dark areas are here. And this kind of sets up the dimension. Then I'll come in with the white and I'll pierce some of this out. And we'll get the inside of the O here. Remember, the color palette is pretty much up to you. Okay, I'm going to come in here with some clean, opaque white here. And really get close here. Try not to Krylon, go one way. And let's flash some of these areas out. And I'll come down here. Paint what you see, not what you think you see. And again, the Createx black and white is very grainy, so you may have to come in and really add the future floor wax. And it will smooth this paint out, definitely. And now I'm going to come in here with this deep blue again, and remember it's transparent, so I can pretty much have a field day here and just go in freehand, a bunch of this, kind of tint over it. The initial white, which is to kind of give a, I don't know, a subliminal type of glow, and then we can lightly dust over that, like so. That's the beauty of these transparent paints. A lot of freehanding at this point. We're just going to knock down and, I don't know, transition and subdue these white highlights. It gets to be overkill if you have bright on bright, so we're going to knock this down. That's why we're doing it. We can also take the blue and shade at the very tops of these letters. I always make this decision at the end on how much of a gradient I want. Now, if this was an opaque blue, I could not do this. I would actually powder out all my edges. But you can just be kind of sneaky, come in here, and just give this a nice little transition from top to bottom. On the R here, let's calm these highlights down a little bit. You'll see this process through a lot of illustrating of subduing highlights back down. Just tinting over these white highlights a little bit. But on the transition of the taper, let's bring that darkness over into the lightness. Let's do it down here too, where it kind of creeps in on you. But it's still there, but we just want to tint over a little bit. And I'll come over here on the M and the O. Remember, I'm just shading down, kind of flaring down a little bit. I did this transparent deep blue intentionally just to kind of show everybody that you can actually sneak a paint like this in here as long as the pre-existing edges are established. And I'll continue to transition this black to dark blue concept here. You want this to be kind of sneaky, coming out of the black into blue, and hopefully in the end we will have these kind of bluish refracting metal letters, or chrome letters. Okay, we have our subdued highlights here. This was the initial white that we tinted over. That's actually just a very calm type of highlight, but I'm going to bring the freehand template in, and you really got to be careful not to overdo it with this. We're going to come in here with some Leave It Alone finalizing white, and just put some fat and thin stripes, little foggy things on the insides of these, and it will give it more of a refractive quality from the dimension. Now again, I want to mention that the t-shirt art is just coming here and kind of freehand this break. It still works, but it's kind of, I don't know, quick looking. If you're getting, I don't know, $800 for a sign, hopefully you have to understand that the cutting and all the intricate detail is going to be necessary. One of the first students I ever taught told me, I love airbrushing, but man, it takes a long time to get to the end product. That is very much true, and you have to make that decision on if it's worth it, the look that you're getting for the amount of effort you're putting into this. So let's go ahead and move on to the next texture at this time. Let's go ahead and get started on this realistic fire thing here. I'm going to come in with some opaque white, and I'm just going to come in and do some little funky little humps like this. Now as I'm doing this, I'm going to kind of narrate here some of the problems that people make when they're actually doing realistic fire. I have a very simple principle with this, and actually I just say it's less is more. The main thing that people do is they overthink it. If you look at certain people's websites, sometimes they will be like masters of this technique, and they may not be as proficient or as talented in other types of art like portraits and so on. So what I've noticed is there's like a pattern with that, and the people that do good at this, they don't overthink the whole process. So less is more. So this white that I'm using here, I've actually over-reduced it with a future floor wax, and basically the thinner the white is, I think the better you're off. I'm not going to work with any photo references, believe it or not, because again, I want to get a technique down, and then you guys can start looking at different pictures of fire and so on. So for the most part, we're not going to overthink this, and I'm basically doing kind of a Christmas tree or a taper type of concept here. So I guess this kind of looks like somebody had too much cough syrup or whatever, but we're doing a tapering type of pattern here. Don't overthink this. This is basically presupposing the back layer of the fire. So we're actually going to dust all this out, and you won't really see most of it when we're done. But what we're going to do is different layers that the eye presupposes some type of subdued movement or some type of subliminal movement. Now, when I taught this for the first time at one of my getaways, a lot of the students, and again they're learning, so that's fine, they came in and they put a bunch of stripes here. You definitely do not want to do that. That will actually screw this up. But kind of fuzzy horseshoes, kind of fuzzy arcs. It would also do, down here at the bottom, is I'll kind of fog some white in there. This is the fire's hottest point. It's going from light to dark. So I'll definitely oversaturate that area. Okay, so basically I'm working vertically, kind of in your face. If you have a gas tank or whatever, you can actually turn it up the exact same way. It's easier for me just to kind of work up and down like this. But you can do whatever you want as far as how you initially position the canvas or the metal plate or whatever you're doing. Okay, for the next step here, I'm going to come in with just a basic, simple French curve. I've taped the inside of this so that we don't pick up these cheesy patterns here. Don't fall for all the propaganda. You don't have to buy all these templates and stuff that are out there. If you want to use them, fine. But again, it's really edge dependent, and it's really technique dependent, and then you kind of add whatever type of edge you want. But with this, I'm going to start at the bottom here. I normally like making the edges bigger towards the bottom, and then as I go up, I will make them smaller. I'll probably switch this around and do smaller edges. Wipe the paint off somewhere. Everybody knows I wipe the paint off on my arm as a teaching warning that it may end up on the surface, in which you're going to have to do reconstructive surgery. So one of the biggest mistakes people make with these templates is they get too carried away with them. They turn the fire into a Swiss cheese type of look. You got to be real careful with that. There is definitely a learning curve to this. It's one of the harder things to do in airbrushing, along with portraits and t-shirt lettering. But if you have at least a basic technique to approach it, again, you can keep practicing, change up the colors, and you know, kind of make it your own. So this is the first step here. Let me go back to my original edge. I went like this. I'm going to flip this around. Let's do another one here. And you can also do smaller edges like this with that same initial edge. and I can just kind of cruise up here. And there's a whole, let me switch this around, there's a whole trick to what we're doing here. We're going to transcend these hard edges out a little bit with a particular stroke in which I think you have to have some type of way to think about the flow. It's a lot different to see a picture of a pattern of fire as opposed to actually looking at your campfire out in the woods or something like that. That's kind of the state of mind you have to have. This is very, very thin, see-through, and so on. You don't want to come in here and just clobber a ton of paint on this. You also have to make sure your airbrush is really, really clean, because if you don't, you could have surging, and it's really going to screw this up. Let's start with this in the middle here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off and do this stroke in white. I'm going to stop the video, then I'm going to get a white surface, and then do this same concept here in black, just to kind of show you the exact move that I'm doing. I think out of everything, this is the most important part out of all of this. You're going to have to do this maybe 100 times. And sometimes, if I've done it too much, I kind of get dizzy and I mess it up too. But for the most part, it kind of gets you in and out with the technique. So test our flow off to the side. We're going to come in, and since this edge is hard, we're going to come in and just kind of taper this out. Now watch what I'm doing here. This is kind of like, get that out of there, this is kind of like the old school flame type of thing. And you can kind of fuzz it down and so on. So watch how I do this one up here now. I may come in a little bit smaller. Maybe fuzz that down. And let's do this one down here. Just pretend you're drawing, I guess, old school flames. Now what you have to be careful with too is don't get too spaghetti-ish with this. I myself and other students, that's normally what destroys this whole thing, is if you get too liney and too strandy with it. And again, I will pull this out on a white surface with black airbrush paint just to kind of show you what this looks like on a different surface, or different colored surface. You kind of see how that's kind of building that. Again, this is the back layer. I'm going to basically dust over all this with deep red. Let's do a couple of dinky ones right here. I step back. I looked at this, and let's do one maybe over here. Trying to violate your margin over here and over here, try to keep this balanced. I also will cut in with black when necessary to kind of trim this back out. I think you have to, because it's easy to get carried away. Transition that out. Let's take this one over here that I just did. We'll go ahead and go to the top now. Okay, let's come in here now. Let's put our dinky ones in. And again, I will cut in with my black. This is all going to be gone. This cheesy stuff here is probably going to be tapered out. But again, this is kind of a just a little guide on how this fire needs to taper down a little bit. You can kind of switch these back and forth. And again, look, I go real dinky as I get towards the top. Now let's be careful over here. We got a little edge. We're going to come and do the same kind of tapering, old school flame look. But let's kind of push this to where the actual fire does taper. I think this is a real important part. The thing that's cool about this is that once this is buried, all this kind of really works, again, to presuppose movement. So here's an edge here. And I guess I kind of picked this whole concept up by really studying fire, or at least looking at it. I did not study for months and months and months, but I studied at least the main thing, the main characteristic the fire has, which basically it has these little hot points that taper into soft little elements and nuances, and it's all backed in layers, and the layers work forward, basically in red, orange, and yellow. and then you can throw whatever little funky colors in you want to. The main thing is keep it light, over reduce your white, that kind of rhymes, and then definitely keep everything flowing also. Now it's time for me to back off this here in a minute because I'm definitely going to overwork this. So I'll tint all this down with a transparent deep red. If you want to, you can use KANDYs or whatever, but it's really up to you as far as the colors. So let's do this with black now, just for visual purposes here. Again, this little stroke, you can add to it, take away from it, or whatever, but we're basically trying to transition the white paint out, and here's what it looks like. You're basically coming in and basically doing some old school flames, like so, crisscrossing or whatever. That's kind of what you're doing, and you're tapering these out. Again, we can come in, let's put one this way, do it like this. You're just kind of crisscrossing these things around, and you're kind of fading the white out a little bit. This has really helped me in other classes with people just understanding what we're doing. These are kind of no-nonsense kind of fading strokes. I can kind of do fine little lines. Don't do too many of those because you're going to have a big batch of spaghetti on your hands. And then maybe we can actually bring this around like so and just do some freehanding. But believe it or not, that's what I'm doing to get this look. Going from a hard edge out to a soft edge. Don't do a lot of crylining back and forth. I'm never a big fan of waving the airbrush back and forth. These are kind of like loose dagger strokes that are kind of going all over the place. But certainly this looks horrible in black, but you can kind of at least understand what we're doing. And let's do one more. If I have a little one, it might look like this. There's a dinky edge, and I might come in. Fade it down a little bit. But as horrible as that looks, that's what we're doing with the white. Yeah, I did say I'm going to cut into this with some black before I do the red, just to kind of give this good composition, make sure it's not too busy. Give a good balance basically. Let's get rid of this over here. You can just kind of slice into some of this stuff. Fire looks good when it actually tapers and it kind of breaks up or what have you. So some of this I can get rid of. Let's get rid of some of this here. That all has to go. Yeah, I definitely need to get all that black out of my airbrush. I'm going to come in here with some deep, transparent red. You can really use whatever red you want to, but you better be careful and make sure that you make it red. You don't need a cheesy pink background. And again, some of you guys at this point may sneak in automotive paints, KANDYs, whatever. You can definitely use this Createx paint. And certainly Createx makes auto air also. And again, I'm going to keep overextending this white. Let's stir this up a little bit. Keep this stuff as thin as possible so we don't powder out our nice little things that we did in the background. You know, on the next step, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to what I'm getting ready to do here, or what I'm not going to do. Normally in the past, what a lot of people do is they actually take and go to the exact same areas that they sprayed the first time when they did their edges. You definitely don't want to do that. You want to try to randomly pick some different areas. And on the second layer, which is the orange, I'm not going to get carried away and do as many as I did the first time, because then you're just going to have a mess on your hands. So do maybe half that amount, or just kind of keep an eye on things and see how busy it's getting. And we'll do some more of these in random different areas here. This is pretty void here. And I'll just kind of crawl up the flame pattern here and flip this around. Let's pick different sides and areas, and let's diversify as we go. Maybe put a big one down here. Now again, what I'm doing is I'm setting up the transparent orange with this. Let's come over here this way. And let's do our little universal stroke here. Again, you're going to have to make sure your airbrush is clean when you're doing this. If it's dirty and you start getting surges, you're going to be in trouble. Let's frost this one down also. You can still see these in the background. Don't want to kill those. But watch, like, again, right up in here, I think it's important to kind of fade these out, like right in here also, in this area. Just kind of fade those down a little bit. And going to the top here, we'll do some super duper dinky ones here. Again, I almost put those in the exact same places as the other ones were. Now this is real important that you actually taper these, like I said on the first layer here. These have to kind of go nowhere. Okay, let's fade that down. Let's do this one right here. This is the point right here. If I had a dirty airbrush, I would definitely pay the price. I'm going to come in and emphasize this one a little bit more here. It's kind of a focal point. So you basically notice I'm not getting as busy as we kind of taper off. This kind of needs to go out and go nowhere. Again, I'll cut in with black if I need to. I got my transparent orange here. I'm just going to come in and kind of, not totally blast this out, but just kind of lightly cover up all the white areas. Again, later on I may have to come back in with black and kind of trim out the spaghetti lines. Because these, the spaghetti lines is actually what the eyes pick up from a distance. So as you can see how this is coming together, there's many different ways that you can pull fire off. Let us all not forget that it's art. It's art and it's technique. And it's what you think's cool, what you think's groovy. And I have these glowing areas that I definitely do not want to cake over, because that's what the eye picks up from a distance. Now if this was an opaque orange, this would be gone. I would have killed all this. It really would have kind of powdered out all my contrasting features, which is of course the glowing areas and so on. Go to the top here, we'll knock some of this down. I'll definitely be cutting into some of this up here. I don't want that totally redundant. These are choices you make as you get to the end of things. Okay, we're going to come in now with some final white, and I would actually call this accenting. So you better be careful on this stage. We're going to come in, we're just going to dust out some white, presupposing the fire's hottest point from light to dark. And do a little bit of white here at the beginning of the fire. Don't get too carried away. It just kind of sets up a transition for, again, more edges. Now, I'm just going to come in here with a few of these, kind of jump around. Notice I don't move real quick when I'm teaching because it's easy to mess things up. Maybe one there, one there. Let's do a smaller one over here. We'll definitely break this up a little bit right in here. Let's do one that's pretty boring in this area, or it needs something. Let's go with a bigger one right there. And we'll start crawling towards the middle a little bit. Okay, so let's start right in this area here. Same thing. Don't get too carried away. It's going to be sneaky. Remember, we're going to come in with our black and rip out and crop anything we don't like, so that is an option you're going to have. I'm going to come in with an opaque yellow after this. Certain types of transparent yellows will actually look like a cheesy green. You want to be careful. But I want to mention that when I come in with opaque yellow, I'm not going to get too nutty with them. I'm just going to really set it on top of these white little areas here. So I'm doing all this, and I'm not really even using a photo reference, because again, as an airbrush teacher, I'm trying to teach a technique. And it's really a hard thing here to teach. Something that's so artistic and so random. You gotta just try to do the best you can with what I'm showing you here. Anybody that ever says that they stopped learning is selling themselves short. Maybe one thing to mention with all this is to actually just study smoke. Because if you actually see how smoke looks, I know there's a picture of one of the Rolling Stones smoking a cigarette, or just look up smoke on Google Images or something like that, and pay attention to how it flows, and maybe that's a good metaphor for what we're doing here. We're basically layering levels of smoke, tinting over it, and try not to get too busy. Get my tip dry out there. Make sure that you come in, and all we're doing is we're just setting up this loud yellow to be tinted over with some of the Auto Air paint. And again, you could use KANDYs or whatever. Again, be very articulate with this, very surgical. Some of this stuff's going to be gone here in a few minutes. I'm actually going to trim that out with black and some of this out, because again, I want to keep my continuity and my flow of the fire going. And when you're making little weird decisions on the sides here, it could come back to haunt you, but luckily we can trim that out. So I'll continue with my yellow here. Next I'm going to bring in this Auto Air KANDY Sunset. You can actually use like a golden yellow if you want to. The main thing here is that this yellow didn't turn green when we put it on top of the white. So this opaque yellow on top of that opaque white kind of retained a yellow look. But regardless, it's still cheesy and too loud, so you can come in with this sunset color and you can kind of calm it down a little bit. Kind of dust over the whole thing. And because it's transparent, it's going to retain all your other layers, so this is a good thing about using KANDY concepts, as everybody brags about. Now, I am losing some of my red, but normally what I do is I wait till the end and I'll come in with black and red, probably red first, then black to trim this out. But for the most part, you can still see the layers well. Well, let's definitely not forget that fire is red, so we'll bring some of our red back in. Don't be too sloppy with this. You want to kind of trim or border this out. Okay, let's cut back into this with our black now and kind of try to get our composition back. When you come in with red and all these other colors, it's pretty nutty. You can see how we can kind of rebuild that just by slicing into it. Don't jump in here in the middle with your black. I think you'll screw it up, but you can see how just kind of cutting into that we can get it all back, or most of it. Okay, I'm going to sneak in this burnt orange color from Golden Fluid Acrylics. It's a transparent color. Just kind of hit certain areas, kind of transition this yellow. You don't want to kill your yellow, and again, I don't know how good the camera's picking this up, but when this is clear coated, that's going to have a very, very cool look. This burnt orange is kind of the counterbalance between the dominance of the red and the cheesiness of the yellow. And we'll bring back a little bit more of our red here. You're going back and forth, back and forth. The main thing is don't kill your edges. So let's go ahead and wrap this up here. If I keep adding edges and color to this, I'm actually going to kill it, and I'm really just going to kind of bury everything, and it's going to hit critical mass and just be over. So I like 3 levels of fire here to combine a total look. So go ahead and use whatever colors you want to add to this, take away from it, and we'll see you next time.